Welcome to The Explainer. Okay, let's dive right into this incredibly fascinating topic. Today, we're looking closely at the geopolitical chessboard of South Asia, and honestly, it is a region that's undergoing a massive, transformational shift right before our eyes. We're going to be unpacking the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, or CPEC, and looking at how a flurry of new roads, railways, and ports is actually redrawing the lines of global power. If you want to understand how the world is changing today, you absolutely have to look at what's happening right here.
Now, to really wrap our heads around what's going on, we have to start with a concept called the Thucydides trap. It's a classic political theory, and it basically suggests that when a rising power threatens to displace an existing great power, it creates some intense strategic friction. For decades since the end of the Cold War, we've lived in a unipolar world, right? One led by the United States. But as our source material highlights, the rapid economic and strategic rise of China is cutting right through that monopoly. We are transitioning into a multipolar world theater, and this shift is exactly what's causing the geopolitical ground to shake underneath us.
So here is our agenda for this explainer. 1. The New Great Game. 2. CPEC and the BRI. 3. U.S.-India Strategic Nexus. 4. Strategies of Containment. 5. Caught in the Middle. And 6. A Shifting Global Order.
Section 1. The New Great Game.
Think back to the Cold War. Historically, Pakistan was a steadfast strategic ally of the United States, especially during the Cold War and the War on Terror. India, on the other hand, often leaned a bit closer to the Soviet Union and historically had a much more complex relationship with the U.S. Not to mention, China and India actually fought a border war back in 1962. But today, the emerging great power competition has completely flipped the board. Pakistan is cementing this all-weather friendship with China. And in direct response to that, the U.S. and India are rapidly forging a really powerful strategic and military nexus, driven by a mutual need to check China's expanding influence.
Section 2. CPEC and the BRI. To truly understand CPEC, you first have to grasp the sheer magnitude of its parent project, the Belt and Road Initiative, or BRI. Launched in 2013, the BRI is arguably the most prevalent and expensive infrastructure project in the contemporary world. We're talking about an estimated cost ranging from $1 to $8 trillion. It involves nearly 70 countries across 3 continents, Asia, Europe, and Africa. The whole initiative is made up of 6 massive economic corridors, and they're all designed to basically recreate the ancient Silk Road for the 21st century, making trade, energy flow, and global connectivity a whole lot smoother.
Out of all those global corridors, academics and geopolitical analysts view Pakistan's role in this massive web as the absolute linchpin. The China-Pakistan Economic Corridor is widely considered the crucial flagship or pilot project of the entire BRI. It's the testing ground. The thought process is, if China can successfully build and secure infrastructure here, it basically proves the BRI model works on a global scale. So why is CPEC so critical to China? Well, the answer is geography, and this number perfectly summarizes it. 10,000 kilometers. By developing the deepwater port of Gwadar down in Pakistan and connecting it via a massive highway system up to China's Xinjiang province, China gains direct access to the Arabian Sea. This allows Chinese exports and, super importantly, their energy imports to completely bypass the Strait of Malacca and the South China Sea. That saves a massive 10,000 kilometers of travel to the Middle East and Europe. Now, for the U.S. and India, this is a huge strategic alarm bell because it allows China to bypass potential naval blockades entirely. To make that physical connection a reality, CPEC was launched with an original investment of $46 billion, which has now ballooned to roughly $65 billion. It follows what's called a 1+4 pattern of economic cooperation. The 1 is the overall corridor itself, and that's supported by 4 key pillars. You've got transportation, upgrading massive highway and railway networks; energy, installing various power plants to solve ongoing energy crises; industry, establishing special industrial zones; and most importantly, maritime, upgrading that Gwadar deep water port.
Section 3. U.S.-India Strategic Nexus.
Now, unsurprisingly, Washington has been watching the rollout of CPEC with extreme caution. The U.S. views the BRI not just as a bunch of economic deals, but as Beijing's vehicle to rewrite the global political and economic order to better align with its own interests. Because of this, American foreign policy shifted pretty aggressively from welcoming China's rise to actively seeking strategies to contain its growing global footprint. And the absolute cornerstone of that containment strategy is a strategic, undeniable pivot toward India. The U.S. has been incredibly vocal about the financial mechanics behind CPEC, too. Former U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo laid Washington's stance out very clearly, saying there's no rationale for IMF tax dollars to go to bail out Chinese bondholders or China itself. Washington frequently warns that CPEC is a dangerous debt trap for Pakistan, arguing that these aren't just friendly grants, but actual loans with guaranteed profits for Chinese enterprises that could ultimately cripple Pakistan's economy and force international bailouts.
Then you have India, which shares borders with both China and Pakistan. New Delhi has its own very fierce objections to CPEC. First off, they officially oppose the project because the corridor passes right through the northern region of Pakistan, which India claims is part of the disputed Jammu and Kashmir territory. Secondly, India really fears a string of pearls strategy, which is a naval encirclement by China in the Indian Ocean. And finally, India views that commercial port of Gwadar with deep suspicion, fearing it could eventually be converted into a full-on overseas military and naval base for Chinese forces.
Section 4. Strategies of containment. So, to counter the Belt and Road Initiative, we are seeing the rapid formation of counter-alliances. It's like a giant puzzle coming together. There's the Quad, an informal security alliance between the US, India, Japan, and Australia, aimed directly at the Indo-Pacific. Then there's AUKUS, focusing heavily on military tech between Australia, the UK, and the US. On the economic side of things, the West launched the B3W, or Build Back Better World. That's a G7 infrastructure plan designed as a direct competitor to offer lower-income countries an alternative to Chinese funding. There's also the AAGC, which is an Indo-Japanese infrastructure initiative.
But this rivalry isn't just happening on paper. It's playing out in direct, physical countermoves. On one hand, you have the China-backed Gwadar port in Pakistan. To counterbalance this, India aggressively invested in operationalizing the Chabahar port, located right over in Iran. And what's really mind-blowing here is that these two massive geopolitical chess pieces are located a mere 172 kilometers apart from each other. Literally side-by-side competition for regional maritime dominance.
Section 5. Caught in the middle.
Okay, so we've heard the US and Indian perspectives, but it's absolutely vital to look at the stated goals from the China and Pakistan side of things. For Pakistan, CPEC represents a desperately needed uplift for its struggling infrastructure and energy sectors. Estimates actually suggest it could create up to 800,000 new jobs over 15 years. Beijing and Islamabad frame this purely as a win-win economic cooperation that transforms the relationship from geostrategic to geoeconomic. Ultimately, Pakistan finds itself in a pretty precarious catch-22, though. They're trying to maintain this ironclad alliance with China while simultaneously trying not to alienate the United States. And honestly, that balancing act is becoming increasingly difficult.
Section 6. A shifting global order.
Ever since the fall of the Soviet Union, U.S. policymakers have basically operated under hegemonic stability theory, which is just the idea that the international system is safest and most stable when one big superpower controls it. But as this explainer illustrates through the lens of CPEC, that unipolar world is fading. The strategic balance of power in South Asia, and really the world, is experiencing a transformational shift. China has gone from a regional power to a true global power, and projects like CPEC are the actual physical arteries of that new multipolar reality. Which leaves us with this final, truly provocative thought. We are seeing billions of dollars poured into concrete, ports, and power plants. But as the Thucydides trap warns us, as military alliances like the Quad and AUKUS form in direct response to projects like the Belt and Road Initiative, and as the US-India nexus deepens to counter Beijing, we have to ask, in a rapidly emerging multipolar world, can this strategic competition really remain just economic? Or will these massive trade routes inevitably become the fault lines of future conflict? It's a question that's going to define the 21st century. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and definitely keep your eyes on the chessboard.